Thanks for tuning in to the HR Uprising podcast. I'm your host, Lucinda. The HR Uprising is focused on helping forward-thinking people professionals deliver real lasting value in their organisations. I'm a chartered psychologist, speaker and trainer, and recently authored the best-selling business book, How to Be a Change Superhero. My day job is founder and CEO of software and training business Actus. This gives me the opportunity to work with other businesses like yours. We are focused on building a better workplace for people wherever they are located, with the help of our performance, learning and talent management software and our training and consultancy services. Every week on the podcast, I will be covering different topics and challenges, joined by relevant experts and real-life people professionals. Thank you so much for tuning in. I really hope you enjoy and get value from this week's episode. Hello and welcome to this week's HR Uprising podcast. And I'm delighted to have a return guest this week in the form of Adrian McDonagh. Now, some of you, actually probably quite a few of you, will know Adrian as the CEO of Hireful, but I'll get him to explain a little bit more about what it is that he does in a moment. The reason I wanted to get Adrian to come back is I spoke to him really early on when the HR Uprising was just getting off the ground about onboarding, because he's absolutely an expert in onboarding and recruitment. And one of the things they've always been front and centre, I think, of the new thinking, fresh thinking around this area. And I figure that at the moment, when we've got hybrid working, when we've got a real war for talent, let me just give all of the cliches out there, it's never been more important than now to build a standout candidate experience. And we all want to know how to do that, whether in a larger or a smaller organisation. So Adrian's going to tell us all about that. But first of all, Adrian, please do introduce yourself.
Hi, Lucinda, and thank you for the introduction. My job title is technically Chief Helper. We have a CEO who runs everything. And if I explain Chief Helper... And
I did know that, didn't I? I did know that, but Chief Helper.
But it'll give a bit of background. I'm one of the co-founders of Hireful. So my role is to really focus on, trying to deliver all of the valuable stuff we put out in the market, try to understand what's going on. And so for the last 13 years, been running workshops and webinars, obviously all for free. It's part of our marketing, part of our get our name out there sort of approach. But also what I love about it, apart from I love speaking, is particularly the workshops, gets you out in front of people. You can hear, you can see what's going on. So that keeps us, I suppose, as an organisation, hopefully, very current. Because whilst we're recruiting, we're just a small company of 70 staff. There's a whole range of different issues that people are dealing with.
And you're, when I first met you, obviously it was pre-COVID, and you were traveling around the country doing lots of face-to-face workshops, and you carried on throughout, but moving lots of stuff online, haven't you, in terms of that, and really sharing your expertise. And some people would remember it was EasyWeb, I think, when I first met you. Was that the name? And now known as Hireful.
Yeah.
Are you still doing are you back out, physically out doing your workshops now, or is it still more?
Yeah, we have been since early 2022. So we were keen to get back out as soon as we can, because I do think the webinars are great, but I think particularly the webinars can be very it's almost like providing a lecture, and we were very happy with the ratings we were getting and the feedback we were getting. But the workshops just allow you, that half a day to really work with people and actually hear and have a good back and forth with them to understand what's really going on for their organisation. So I just think the workshops are valuable.
You're bringing that information back in, and that's why it makes what you're sharing with us today so relevant, because it's pain points that people have right now. So if we were sort of thinking about this as a process, we're back recruiting people, bringing people on board. It's never been more important than to keep those people and to make sure that they're fully motivated. And we know that some of us are bringing people on still continually into a hybrid environment. What do I need to think about if I'm either, is my hat a hiring manager or an HR person in this context?
Typically it tends to be, and one of the things I was quite surprised with is it's still very HR focused. I think HR, possibly maybe because departments, it's so hard to recruit, so managers are so overwhelmed. So giving them more responsibility, for example, to really deliver a first-class onboarding experience, maybe training managers and systemizing it for them, and it probably maybe isn't realistic for a lot of organizations. Ideally, that would be the best way of doing it. You'd all love if you're the new hire, to have your whole experience, the main point of contact, to be all coming from your hiring manager, and for that to be an excellent standard throughout the whole organization, regardless of which hiring manager. But it's possibly wishful thinking. So it does tend to be HR recruitment. In some organizations, then a dedicated onboarding team in some areas. But yeah, in our world, we're mid-market, it's pretty much HR or in-house recruitment.
And so that makes sense, because that's our audience that we've got listening. So again, it's not that our HR people, often they're a department of one or a very small department, pretty lean. So what can we do, or what advice have you got for somebody in that position to be really effective, but not massively time consuming, I guess, but still have an outstanding experience?
Yeah, I mean, there's a bunch of stuff that I've got. I wrote a little list to go through with you, but I guess the overriding principle of it is I don't necessarily feel, it's a bit similar to the stuff we do with advert copy and more broadly candidate experience. I don't necessarily feel, well, we've seen some stats from our ATS, and we've got about 300 customers using it, showing since the turn of the year, they're getting to candidates twice as fast. So they're processing candidates from that apply phase twice as fast, and they're booking interviews twice as fast, actually quicker than twice as fast. So that's really interesting and shows a much more competitive market. But when we look at advert copy and when we look at other things that we see in the marketplace, we don't see, although we do see recruiters moving faster on CVs, we don't necessarily see huge leaps in best practice. We don't see like much better adverts written. We don't see much better candidate experiences being delivered on the whole, is what I'm saying. And I think that's where onboarding falls as well. Whereas I know some organizations are doing it really well because maybe they're recruiting really high-end tech talent and they've got money to throw at it and they've thought about it. Maybe they started as a business from a blank sheet of paper and it's just easier to start like that. But I think on the whole, what we're talking about today is potentially a big competitive advantage, because many of your competitors are probably just working so fast, not manned correctly or staffed correctly to be able to have the time to look at this. So a lot of it is simple, easy things, and some of it will be a bit more challenging, but there is some big advantages you can build into your system and your process here. And it is all about building a system, and that will save you the time, hopefully.
Yeah. So you can a repeatable approach. I'm interested in that 2 times faster, and that makes sense, because I think when we've been recruiting ourselves, you almost, if you don't move quickly enough to show you're interested, then the top candidates have gone. So it's got to be quite a slick, condensed recruitment process.
And as an aside, time to interview is much quicker, because that first interview is now, let's have a chat on Teams, in which case it almost becomes, that person doesn't have to book a day off or anything else like that. They can simply just slot it into their diary in between their morning stand-up or something. Yeah.
Okay, so we're assuming that we've brought these people on board. We're not going through the recruitment in great detail here. We're at the stage now where we want to make sure that we bring people in and set them up for success in a really slick, repeatable way. We know that managers might be very busy, so they don't always plan effectively. We know also that there's evidence that an experience that someone has in the first 2 to 6 weeks in an organisation actually directly correlates with how long they stay with an organisation. So we want to do a great job. Especially when we've put all the effort into recruitment. So what would you recommend what does a good process look like?
Okay, so splitting it into 2 things. So the pre-boarding, before someone arrives, I think the first thing I'd look at is the overall communication strategy. If you've got the time to sort of set it out with your post-it notes and sort of look at what you currently do, have a look at where those gaps are. We want to avoid, there's plenty of research done showing post-offer candidates are excited and engaged, and then there's quite often a bit of a gap then between the start date, even more so if there's background checking and other things to go, and you can start to feel like it's a bit unreal. Like, have I actually joined the organization? Have I seen the contract? Maybe I've signed it, but that was 6 weeks ago. So we want to make sure this person has a sort of continuous feeling that they're part of your organization, that this is happening. It's a bit like buying a house. I'm going through that process at the moment. We've all had that process where you're buying a house and you haven't heard from the estate agent, you haven't heard from the solicitors arranging the purchase, and you start to feel like, is this actually even going to happen? And obviously, inevitably, it does happen, hopefully, but it can feel a bit like that. So we want this sort of communication to be built in, systemized where possible. Maybe there's an ATS, maybe there's an onboarding system, maybe there's a HR system with that. That's not really the issue. but we want to just be thinking about it. So I do see some organizations who almost like send out the whole pack. So if you think about that, I mean, I go back to buying this house. I've literally just been sent a whole load of information, and I haven't really heard from the solicitors in about 3 weeks, 4 weeks. So I would have much more preferred an engaging process where I get sent bit by bit.
Yeah. So it's less overwhelming. So you're getting things in stages, but it kind of keeps you interested as well.
Yeah, and then you get to introduce each piece. Sometimes it's look, and it depends on the tone of voice. We're quite informal, so sometimes like, here's a couple of policies and some stuff you need to sign. This is important for these reasons. And other times it's like, oh, here's some fun info. Here's some positive, lively, engaging information about our benefits. That we wanted to send you. Just have a read through so you know what you're entitled to. So it's just, instead of sending it all in one go, let's break it down. And let's look at that. But also let's build in some emails, pre-written emails into the system perhaps, or even you just saved, whereby if there is a gap and you've got nothing to say to that person, like there is just a delay, imagine there's a delay with background checking, you've just got like an email written that's sort of fun and interesting and engaging, doesn't have to say too much, but also tells the candidate, if you've got any questions, come back to me. And it just fills a gap rather than leaving 4 weeks of nothingness.
Jerry, it's interesting actually that there's two things that contrast that just struck to mind about. It's a long time ago since I was recruited to a large engineering organisation, but I do remember back in the day of paper, I got probably 4 inches thick of policies, which, just, you're never going to read them all hardly, and you're only really interested in the expenses policy and the car policy or whatever it was. So that was kind of, definitely not worth the paper it was written on. Now, obviously, that would be more electronic, but sending it out, what you described there, with a bit of a covering letter, this might be interesting to you because all the benefits type thing. Yeah. And the other thing that struck me, which actually, so my daughter's going to university. Hopefully we'll be happily at university by the time this goes out. And I think the communication widely varies, but they actually had 6-week countdown thing. So 6 weeks to go, you need to be doing blah, blah, fill out your accommodation form, etc., etc. 5 weeks to go, kind of a nice build up, which is sort of what you're saying, isn't it? Keeping people interested, engaged as you count down to joining. Yeah,
it removes that, like I say, you've got a young person in your house off to university. There might be anxiety there as well, and that same person could be joining a new organisation. You can't assume that they're just going to walk in and feel comfortable with everything. I think there's a really key point about each piece. They should absolutely know that they can reach out to and who they can reach out to at any point in time, and also how they can reach out. So you want to be flexible in those communication methods. Is it a phone number you can drop? We've got emails written that we put in the webinar, and it says, feel free to, email me. You can also give me a bell. You can drop me a text message. This is coming from the hiring manager. And it just, if you are a slightly anxious person, and it says like on any matter whatsoever, however small, however big, if you've got a question, ping me. And that's great because it just means you can solve things before they start day one.
And you're building that personal connection as well, aren't you? But the interesting thing is you're building that personal connection when people are very busy, as you said at the start. If you can do these as pre-emails that can kind of go out as frequency, or you can ping it if it's quiet, rather than having to write it. You want to make it a repeatable process that can be done again, but still be personalised.
And fit the organisation's tone of voice. And I always say to people, the tone of voice of your organisation should be, there's a spectrum to it. If you've got a page on your website talking to investors, clearly it's going to be a lot more formal than the one you have talking about graduate recruitment. Generally with recruitment, and include onboarding in that, it is going for that more informal side of your tone of voice. So our emails we have built here, they're going out with emojis on and things like this, because one of our values is fun, and we are quite an informal organisation. So that's important as well, because you just said about like the engineering company who sent you all this paperwork. They might now have a really efficient online recruitment process, and really cool offices.
They probably do. It was a long time ago.
but if the onboarding process is one of them sort of left behind processes, it doesn't reflect it. You might think, oh, that was when they were selling to me. Now I'm an employee. Now this is the reality, that they're a little bit old school, and I just don't get a great feeling about it.
So the pre-boarding, you talked about communication. Is there anything else we need to think about in terms of pre-boarding?
Oh, this is a bit daft, but I quite like, we've adopted one thing here, and I think you'll have to put a link in your show notes to see it. It's from another ATS provider. I've seen what they've done, a company called Lever, much bigger American ATS provider. and they've started doing welcome gifts. So, you know, we've all seen gifts, sort of 3-4 second videos. And
welcome gifts as opposed to gifts.
Gifts or GIFs, I'm not sure. There's a whole internet war determining how to pronounce it. But essentially what we've done within each of our teams now is when they hire someone and they know they've got 2-3 weeks before that person starts, let's say we've got someone hiring into marketing called Kerry Ann, and there's a little whiteboard that's about the size of a laptop screen. And then there's 5 or 6 of us in marketing, and we have to come up with a silly GIF and on the whiteboard it says, "Hi, welcome Kerry Ann." And it's just a daft way of sort of us dancing into the screen and showing that. And then we're doing that as a little competition between each team as to see who can do the best sort of welcome GIF over the year. So I think it will start once it starts.
So you're doing that at the moment at Hireful. So you're all going to have your own little gifts. And do you have to? Is it like a standing one? Then you can put the person's name in digitally.
There's no clever AI, because I know there is some technology that will do that on emails and stuff. And it says it is totally not that. It literally is. We'll write it on the board and we will film it. It will take, maybe if you have to do it 3 or 4 times, it might take 5 minutes. And you just put it out to the team and say, look, what can we do? Obviously, this is an example that matches us and our culture. Yeah. So when I saw this, I thought, this is brilliant. We should totally do this. And our team, when they've seen it, have all gone, oh, this will be a laugh. Yeah. And they'll engage with it. And it will just be something that probably gets sillier and sillier until we say, okay, now it's a couple of years down the line and we've sort of grown a bit bored of it. Let's change it up.
Yeah.
But I suppose the message is, if you can think of that one thing that will make someone stop and go, wow. Now, for us, it might be a silly gift. It might be taking a photo of the team with them all holding up pieces of paper saying welcome and Daphne or whatever it is, you know, that you printed out, which is super easy to do. It's however you want to do it, but it's nice to send one welcome touch before the person arrives, because on day one, we'll talk about it in a second, but before that person arrives, so they start to already feel like there's my team, and they're actually really excited to meet me.
Yeah, they've bothered and made the effort. It's all about effort, isn't it? Demonstrating that effort. Great.
Yeah, and also quirky. It's nice to, you know, how many organisations are out there saying we've got a great culture, it's a fun place, we all get on, you know, and you might have said that in your recruitment process. You would probably say it in your advert copy, but actually, and maybe that was what the interview experience was, as much as you can make the interview experience fun. But you really want to demonstrate that if that is one of your strengths as an organisation or your superpowers, and people love working there, get it out front, you know, because in this market, candidates will still be getting counter-offered from their current employer and offers to say, oh, I've got another interview, would you like to go along? Or just speak to this person, it's only a Teams interview. And you're thinking, well, I've got the contract in front of me. You need to make them feel engaged.
Got you. So that's a unique, appropriate to your culture, but just doing something that's a little bit different.
And check out Hireful. The Hireful, by the time this goes out, you will see stuff on them. We have a Life at Hireful page. We'll be sharing a few of them, I'm sure.
Right,
but like I say, we'll put the link in the thing, because it has come, it's an idea we've stolen from Lever, and their idea and their execution is really good.
I dare say they stole it from somewhere else. That sounds great. Brilliant. Okay, so something unique about it. We've got the communication. Is that everything we need now for pre-boarding?
Yeah, I think we can look at day one, maybe.
Yeah, great. Okay, so what would you do? How would you prepare for day one?
Well, one of the things we do here is a little survey that goes out, and it sort of says, oh, look, here's an example. Here's your team members. It shows them the team members and what they like to do and their interests and hobby. It makes it a bit easier to sort of break the ice, you know, that someone's interested in the same hobby or interest perhaps as you. But also we then survey that new hire and ask them a few things, so they can that information be shared back to their team, but it's also shared to the person managing their onboarding, and we know that then they like, this is their favorite biscuit or something, and they like playing golf or something. So when they arrive day one, I mean, and so many organizations do a nice welcome pack now. Not everyone, but a lot of people do. So we like to, you know, maybe not, we haven't got all the money to throw at it, but we like to personalize it a little bit. So if it was a golf thing, and you said you like jammy Dodgers, then jammy Dodgers would be on your desk day one, and we probably wouldn't have a set of golf clubs there for you, but we a set of golf balls perhaps. So little touches like that, I think, a really nice touch. Once again, things that people won't necessarily expect. I think that's a really, really nice touch.
If someone isn't physically coming in on first day, if they're almost going to be virtual all the way through, would you send it to their house or?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, I would. You've got to try and time it right, but yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you definitely don't want a two-tier system, because obviously most organisations will have some people that are remote now and others that are more likely to come in.
Yeah, so make that effort either way. So yes, I remember you told me that you did that, and I know you do walk your talk at Hireful with that. So you have someone with their favourite colour balloon on the desk or whatever it would be, but something just to again, this personal touch that makes them feel welcome. So you just pick that information up along the way. Yeah,
and I think another one that's really key as well, which I never really thought of hugely until I was doing a bit of research in this area, is doing a shout out to show how proud you are to have hired them. So you should be reflecting that in some of your content back to the candidate. So when you're emailing the candidate saying, we're really excited for you to come on board here, you should be putting something in there to say, we have a very, robust recruitment process, but you've done fantastic to get through it. And we think you're going to be a fantastic addition to the team. Particularly if that's a personalized email that someone's wrote those 2 sentences, particularly the hiring manager, then that person feels like they've won a competition, that it reminds them that they've done a great piece of work to get there. And not everyone gets there, and the company is very proud to have hired them. And then taking that forward, then, announcing new hires on social media, but it's good for your business. It shows you're progressing, and you might say, here's Tony, and he's going to be doing this. It's sort of, you might be announcing some of the new things you're doing and things like that as well. So it's sort of a double win. But it also shows that you've got confidence in Tony and that you're really proud to have hired him.
Yeah, and I think that's funny. That's another parallel with universities, isn't it? Getting people feeling pleased that you've got there, that you made it, so made the cut. All this that sets you up as you mean to go on in terms of seeing a positive future for it, within that organisation. And then in terms of what about the boring part of induction? Any advice on that? Because there is lots of stuff which is, and it's that's often a bit that I think, you can have all the exciting piece, but then you've still got to show people who, what, where. That can be time consuming. Is there any tips for that?
Yeah. And I know some people will want to get all of that out of the way. And I think sometimes it's always a difficult balance. I think the language has to be right. You could send all of the policies and everything off to a new hire before they've even started. And it might take them the best part of 6 hours to read through it all, go online, complete this e-learning course. I think you've got to be very careful because, they're not unemployed, they're not on the payroll yet. They're doing that work for free. So think about each item. If it's the employee benefits information, well, that's in their interest. You're giving it to them. If they choose not to read it, that's sort of down to them. If it's the policy around your, a light manufacturing site and it's around the health and safety, you probably want to avoid handing it to them in advance, and you want them to come in on day one, and that's the first thing that someone walks them through, so they ensure they fully understand everything and how to be safe in that environment. So it is a little bit looking at each piece, and I think being flexible, because some people will want to just plow through. They'll have they'll have garden leave, essentially, or free time, and they'll want to plow through stuff. So you can put that in there and say, look, if you want to go on and do these pieces, online courses, then by all means feel free to. However, you absolutely don't have to, and we'll walk through it on the day. Because I think some people feel like a bit anxious about starting a new job, and they might want to, maybe it's their first time back in the workforce in a while. I know I've got a family member who that relates to, and they completed all the e-learning courses in advance because they thought, well, that's a way of building their confidence because it was a little bit low. So give people access, but make sure you balance it right and explain it right so it's not essential.
Don't expect them to do it. Do you have a view on how long the induction should take?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people are talking about, it seems to be the obvious bit is 30 days for the sort of intense stuff. And then after that, the person's out probably doing more of their job, hopefully. But it really depends on the nature of the job and how easy it is to explain, and the environment, and how important health and safety is and things like this. So it's a bit of a strange one. I know when we talk about KPIs, one of the things we sort of highlight to people they want to be looking at and measuring is time to the person, new hire, adding value. So how long does that take, and measure that? So that's probably a bit of a gauge to, is the induction functioning really well, because how quickly can you get them to a point where if they're a salesperson, if they're a customer support person, they're answering a certain amount of tickets, and you think actually now they're giving us back more than we're investing at this point, because now they can do 20 tickets a day or whatever it is in amongst their training.
So that's one thing that you're almost saying, is it, because obviously it isn't a end of induction fully productive, it's a graduated thing.
Yeah.
So is that how you'd measure success, is basically by having some KPIs around the job role, at which point someone can independently complete aspects of it? How else would you do that?
Well, we encourage people as part of the candidate experience and then bleeding into the onboarding. Well, we encourage to survey, and you might laugh at this. So post interview, how was your interview experience? Here's 5 quick questions. We want to ensure the interview experience is an excellent experience. Would you mind answering 5 questions just to tell us how well we did? Post offer, how was your recruitment experience? We want to improve as an organisation. You're going to be a new employee. Do you mind telling us some of the things we can improve and what worked well for you? 30 days after the onboarding, so after start, how was your onboarding experience? And then 90 days after start, the piece that you don't tend to see, certainly not when I ask in my workshops for a show of hands, how many of you measure any aspect of, was it a good hire? And the best way I've seen that measured, and the way we're now building into our ATS as well, is to ask the candidate, how good a fit is this role for you from 1 to 10? And to ask the hiring manager, same question, how good a fit is this candidate from 1 to 10 for you? 2 aspects to that is, obviously, one is if you get a slightly lower score, and I think anything 7 or lower would be sort of worth a bit of a check-in with the candidate. This clearly isn't anonymous, this last one.
Yeah.
But also it allows you to sort of build those scores. Obviously, it allows you to check in with the hiring manager as well. Allows you to build those scores so you can then reflect back and understand, do the candidates that have a better fit after 30 days, that have a greater chance of staying with us 12 months, which sources are giving us the candidates that end up being a really good fit from both sides, hiring manager and candidate. So we're getting really big on data, and we're happy to build it into our process and encourage people and say, this is what we think we should do. The only thing we think is really important about it is you're not just gathering data, you make it really obvious to the candidates and the new hires that this is how we're using it, this is what we are doing.
Yes, to make the process better. And of course, it's one of those things with data, you don't get the benefit until you've been doing it for a while. So you've got to start somewhere and then track it. But and
hopefully you can benchmark it as well. I know that's something we're looking to do now that we're a certain size. So if people are saying, we're getting this sort of score, then we can go, okay, well, the community, we have to be careful here. We're not going to say, this company over here is getting this score, but we're going to say the community of all of our customers who are using these are the averages they're getting. So you've got something to reflect it on.
Great. So we talked about sort of communication, a nice sort of making people feel personalised in terms of, or personally valued, pre-boarding and at induction. Talked about KPIs in terms of just surveying, so just getting data about the experience from the candidate point of view, but then ultimately after 3 months as well, not forgetting, not just doing really short term, but at the end as well, and then longer term, I suppose, in terms of retention. And I gathered from what you were saying there is those things are reasonably uncommon when you're doing your surveys with people. What proportion of people are doing those things when you're talking to them?
Very, very few. Really few. So to go over and give you an idea, I think there'll be a small number of organisations, we're talking about mid-market organisations, avoiding the big enterprise ones, which I don't have a lot of access to. I'd say a small number would be doing some sort of onboarding survey to say, you've been here 30 days, how was it? A small number would probably do a sort of end of recruitment process survey saying, hey, look, can you tell us about how well we did? Very few, very, very, very few are doing post interview. And I think that's really key. There's only 5 questions in our little survey, but it also ensures managers, once managers know that they're going to be like a little customer service survey is going to be sent to every candidate they interview. The first question on our survey is, was your interview conducted in a professional manner? So we've all done it before. I'll just finish this email before I go down and speak to the candidate, and it's already sort of 5 minutes past 1, and you get down there at like maybe 12 minutes past 1. If you know that that's the first question on the survey, you're going to be on good form, and it just really makes sure everyone's at the top of their game. So I think that's a really key one. But I also think, all the work's done. How it's almost madness. I think what it is because you haven't got a perfect solution. No one's ever going to come up with a perfect solution to say, how do we measure a good hire? It's like progress or perfection. So because they can't find perfection, they don't seek out progress.
Yeah.
So, progress after 90 days, how good a fit is this role for you? How good a fit is this new employee for you? And just take the score. And then you can deal with the individual situations and the stories behind it as you go. But you need some data to work on and move forward with.
Yeah, and I think the actual act of asking for feedback is consistent with you showing that you're bothered. And you're bothered about their experience. So it's not just doing something with it, but the fact that people are surveyed all the way through makes them feel valued. So it's consistent with that, fact that we wanted to recruit you.
Yeah, and that probably continues for the whole. If the organisations that say yes to doing these things, that probably continues for the whole journey in their employee life cycle with employee engagement surveys and pulse surveys, and they see that the company wants their opinion and acts on their opinion.
Yeah. Absolutely. Brilliant. Adrian, thank you so much. I thought that was really concise and focused and some great tips that, as is often the case, might seem like common sense, but are not necessarily that commonly put into action. So an opportunity for anyone listening to be able to build that standout employee experience as people come on board, because those are really quite helpful and practical. If people want to get in touch with you, obviously I'll put links to what we talked about in the show notes, but how is it best or easiest for people to contact you?
Yeah, well, I'm all over LinkedIn, which is just Adrian McDonagh, so McDonagh. I'm on, obviously, Hireful, it's just Hireful, so hirful.co.uk. Yeah, and my job is just slightly bizarre. So my job is just helping people. So if people have questions or anything, they can reach out to me, and I'm there. I always say that after my webinars, that if you've got any follow-up questions, just reach out, message me, and that quite often there's 100 or 200 people on the webinar. Luckily, most people say that's a lovely gesture and just go on about their job. Because if dozens come back to me every time, I'd have to stop saying that. But the good news is very few people do. So when they do, I can help people. So yeah, I'm really accessible.
I think it's a really good fit with what you guys do. I mean, I've been on your webinars a few times, and if people like listening to the HR Uprising podcast, I think they would enjoy your webinar series because there's lots of educational content there that's really, really practical.
Well, you are the #1 rated guest webinar presenter we've had. We don't rate my webinars against you, but from the guest presenters, I wouldn't be able to handle the competition. From the guest presenters, you were the #1 rated. So I feel like I have to give that plug to you.
That's very kind. Lovely. Thanks so much for coming on, Adrian. Really great to catch up with you as always.
Thanks, Lucinda.
I really hope you found this week's episode useful and enjoyable. If you did, perhaps you could recommend us to a friend or colleague, or give us a review on your platform of choice. It really helps new listeners to find us. Now, you can access links to any of the information mentioned in this show via the website www.hruprising.com. Further free resources are also available at www.actus.co.uk. There you can also find out more about our software and training solutions. Finally, why not join our LinkedIn group, the HR Uprising, to share ideas and collaborate with other like-minded people professionals. Thank you for listening to the HR Uprising podcast.